Good morning everyone and welcome to this video in which I will talk to you and explain the good functioning of the Ionic framework that I will review with the help of different modules. First, I will give you a short introduction on the usefulness of Ionic, what it's used for with a presentation, and secondly, its functioning with practical explanations by explaining its advantages and disadvantages. So, let's go for the introduction. What is the Ionic? Well, it's a development framework that is widely used and that allows you to save a lot of time in order to design cross-platform mobile applications. To develop a cross-platform mobile application has never been an easy task. Indeed, besides the fact that there are many different phone models, there are different operating systems. The most famous of which are Apple's iOS and Google's Android. The difficulty appears at this moment because it's necessary to develop on different OS operating systems and to take into account the different versions. You also have to test your application on a lot of phones. Finally, you will often find yourself with as many versions of your application as the number of existing phones. This means a lot of time and money spent. That's why in 2013 Ionic was born, which is an open source framework for developing applications for smartphone. Specifically, it's a set of components and tools to be able to develop more easily mobile applications working only on Google Chrome. Ionic will use tools like HTML5, CSS3 and JS. It integrates other frameworks like Angular, React and Vue. To use native components such as the camera GPS or even the smartphone Vibro, Ionic uses a system of library and plugins compatible via Apache, Cordova and Capacitor. For example, if you want to use the smartphone's camera, you will install the camera plugin and in your source code you will just have to call the relation functional that will allow user to take a picture. You don't need to know the operating system. The Ionic application will take care of it by calling the function that will call the corresponding plugin that will allow the user to access his camera. Ionic allows to operate on different operating systems. It will only take one source code to run your application on either iOS or Android. It's also possible to deploy on your smartphone in order to debug. However, there are some problems. The Ionic application will tend to be slower than a native application, but Ionic has greatly improved the performance of its framework and continues to do. Achieving a specific functionality can be more complicated because you won't necessarily find a plugin that fits your needs. Nevertheless, even if Ionic contains some small disadvantages, Ionic allows you to save a considerable amount of time for the development of your application in a dynamic way. And this is what we will see and understand together during this course. So that's it for the introduction. To start an Ionic project, we will need Node.js. To do this, we need to install it. We go directly to the official website of Node.js. We are redirected to this page where we have as a message download for macOS. Indeed, I use a Mac. You can also use an operating system under Linux or Windows. You will have directly the conversation with the links, the LTS redirected according to your system. So we actually take the LTS, we click on it. So there you go. Once it's downloaded, we go to the package. We have the installation protocol, the introduction, continue. If you need to read the license, I will let you read it. We accept. The destination is perfect and we install. I have a small security system. I enter my password. Here we go. The installation is quite fast. We will also check if the system is well installed in our computer. To do this, we're going to ask the command that will allow us to know whether or not it's well installed. So we type version common Node.js. We go to see the doc. I take the first one. We read a little bit, we scroll, and here we have a comment here. You can copy the comment if you need to. We will go to the terminal, paste, and there you go. I have the answer that I have the version 16.14.0, so we have not installed. Remember that Node.js is not a server or a framework. It's just a JavaScript execution environment that can be used to write server-side services called API, Application Programming Interface. It's an alternative to the server languages like PHP or many others. After installing Node.js, we will be able to install Ionic on our system. So, we will have to enter the CLI, so we will write Ionic SLI installation. I will take this one for example. We have as SLI description. Here is the link to install Ionic. As a reminder, the acronym SLI stands for Command Line Interface, which will allow us to interact with our system. And that's what we are going to do. We're going to copy the Ionic installation link in order to execute it in our terminal. And we copy. If you are like me, under Mac or Linux, don't forget to put sudo before writing. If you are under Windows, you don't need it. And press enter. Once executed, you will probably be asked to enter your password. Once downloaded, we can use this Ionic SLI anywhere in our terminal to create new Ionic projects, to run them, to create an application, and so on. Now we are going to execute the Ionic start command. Following that, it will ask you some questions like, what should the name of this project be? I name it Ionic Angular Project. But you can obviously choose another name that will fit. We are going to ask you which framework you want to work on, so either Angular or React. We'll choose Angular. We also have the starter template. We have the choice between blank, which is a totally empty project that we can create from start to finish, the side menu, a page with a side menu, and the tabs with a tab menu that will give you some tips. So we're going to start on blank, which will generate a new project and install all the dependencies like Angular or Ionic. This project requires waiting for this to finish, so I invite you to finalize this download before continuing to the next step. Now you can navigate it to the file we created earlier, which is right here. We are going to copy it, and we are going to paste it. We enter this command, and now we are going to run Ionic serve. The Ionic service will be able to run a development server that runs your application. Here we have our first Ionic application. That's it for this first part about our Ionic project with the installations. If you ever have difficulties regarding the installation, feel free to review the video and consult the documentation. You can find a lot of information on sites like Stack Overflow. I will see you in the next video for the second part, where we'll be able to customize our Ionic application. See you soon! To create our project, we will need a text editor. But what is a text editor? A text editor is a program for creating and editing text files. So, there are different text editors. You have Atom, Sublime Text, or Visual Studio Code. On our side, we will start with Visual Studio Code, but you can also use another text editor according to your preference. There is no problem. So, concerning the realization, you can very well create pages of type HTML, CSS, JavaScript, for example, for the front side. For the back part, you have, for example, the part PHP. We go directly to the official website of Visual Studio Code and we click on download. Then, depending on your operating system, you can download the application. I take directly Mac. That's it. So I will let you download and follow the download protocol, which is quite simple, and we will meet in a moment. Once it's downloaded, we will find ourselves here. So here is the page. Here you have Explore, so it will be to scroll in your structure. Here we have the search section, which will allow you to search for the files you need. Here we have all the source control, so all your emptied files. Here you have Run and Debug if you need. Then we have the extension, so this is very important. I will show you some useful extensions. And then we don't need this. This is the NX console. When you need the console, for the moment it's not the case. So we're going to create a folder directly. I will show you directly. New folder. We will do folder. Now we will go and find the folder. We will go directly to File, Open Folder. In the office, I found my folder like this. And there, I will click on New File. For example, I will call it index.html. Here you have directly your HTML file. Concerning the extensions, I installed the one of Angular Essentials, also Angular Language Service, which will allow you to facilitate the fact of writing the code. It will propose you directly tags to incorporate to write Angular code. The extensions will allow you to make your work easier. They will also allow you to organize and structure your code well in order to improve your quality and your work, and that's why I use VS Code. That is to say that it has a lot of facility at the level of extensions. There is a plurality. You can install all that you want, of course, depending on its effectiveness. You will always have a note according to the users, but you can very well, if you want, to go directly to the terminal. If you want to make comments, it's very easy to use, very simple and very playful. That's why I use this text editor. That's it for this video about Visual Studio Code and its installation. Now we're going to move on to the practical side of the project. Now that we have downloaded Ionic, we can open and consult the project folder we have created. Here it is. And we find inside several folders and also files. There, for example, we have the packages. We will go directly to the source folder. We will go to the app subfolder and consult the HTML page. And very quickly, we see that there are some quite particular HTML tags. Indeed. For example, the tag IonApp is a tag, but with the Ionic component at the beginning. But don't panic, you will find all these components in the documentation on the official website of ionicframework.com. You will find the whole documentation with the installations, UI component, native API, Angular, React, Vue, and Sally. You won't be left alone. On the other hand, we are going to move to the HTML page of home.page.html, and inside we will find the title of the page right here. Ion title as well as the title of the toolbar. And so we are going to try a modification that we can bring. So this we delete. We're going to keep some text with the p tag like this. We're going to remove what we are not interested in, like this. And we're going to add, here is a text, simply. And just underneath, we will put an Ionic component. So Ion button, we will put click here, we will close the tag, and we will add some Angular code in this opening tag. We will simply tell it that when we click on it, we will put on a change text parameter, and we will see what happens. Now we go to the page home.page.ts. We will then write our program. We will declare text equals default start of text, like this. Just below, we will put our method on change text, and inside we will put this text equals changed. Simply put, when we click on the bottom, the text will be changed. Don't forget the brackets. I will close them. And here we go. So I replace the text by writing the variable directly with text. And here I click here and the text has been changed. And that's it for the beginning of our project. I will wait for you in the next video for the rest of this project. Good morning everyone, we meet again in this video of introduction of project concerning the realization of a to-do list to realize with Ionic. So in this video we will see together what we will need for the good conception of this project. So we will have to create an Ionic project. We will have to understand the components, read the documentation, create components, and incorporate style. So to create an Ionic project, you will need your command terminal and to install Node.js beforehand. I have put the link in front of it, so https://nodejs.org and download. And then you will have to install Ionic with the command Ionic start. Then you will be able to name and launch your project for the launch with the command Ionic serve. And in a second time, we have the Ionic components. So the component is named first with Ion at the beginning. Then you put a dash and you will have directly the component. There, for example, you have Ionic cart in order to organize the data of a page. Also, you have Ion bottom, so for the insertion of bottom, Ion title, which allows you to insert a title to your toolbar, and Ion toolbar, which allows you to create a set of features with Ion header, Ion content, and Ion footer. It's the global content of your page. You will have Ion toolbar and you will be able to put your Ionic tags and components directly to make functionalities. Also, consult the documentation. It's useless to learn by memory the different components, but you have to know how to use them. And for that, nothing better than the documentation, which is very well provided and very explicit. I let you consult it. I put the link just below. You have a search bar. If you have, for example, a keyword, for example, I'm going to put toolbar, you will have directly the tag Ion toolbar, which will be displayed, and also its explanation, how to insert with the boot code. So to create components, you will need Ion list to create a functional list, so that you will have directly the meaning. For example, you put same, the documentation, you type Ion list, and you will have directly the functionality. It also allows you to propose an action or a confirmation or a notification with the help of alerts. and to make modification or bring choices to the user with models. So that's the global components, but you have different ones. You have several. I'll let you consult them if you need, but we won't need them for this project. And finally, we have the incorporation of the style thanks to the CSS that allows to have a visual display rather playful. So for example, the padding, which allows to make gaps or filling, the display which allows to define the type of display, the font size to define the size of the font of the text, the background color for the background color, and the margin for the spacing between the margins. You can make the modifications and customizations you want, but be careful to establish a style that remains fun and not too full, very important. And here we are now, we can start our project, and to do so, I invite you to watch the next video. See you. Good morning everyone and welcome to this video. To realize our project, we will need to know some Angular functionalities. In the first step, we will see the structure, and in the second step, some directives we will need. To learn more, we will look in detail at all our files when creating an Ionic project. For example, my folder is called Angular Test. It's a blank project that I just installed and created. So first, we have the subfolder HUE, and inside we have files. This folder is useful for everything that is unit test. We won't need it. It's not the subject of our course, so it won't be interesting. It's for doing functional and integration tests. Then we have the Node modules folder, that module that we have installed before. And we have source. Source is in this folder, where we will use it to work on developing a project. Inside this folder, there is an app component by default with all the files, for example, CSS, HTML. So this is as CSS. To have more packages, we also have the TypeScript file. So for example, we have the file app_routing.module.ts, which will allow us to do routing. Then we have the file app.module.ts, which is the heart of our project. Inside, we will be able to enter the modules that we will need via Angular, which is separated by several modules that we need. We also have the folder environment. Inside we find two types of files, a prod, which is here, and a div. So simply to develop, and the second prod, which will allow to deploy in production. We have a file index.html in the Angular, which contains only one page in our project. We have the main file right here to be able to launch the application, the CSS for the style, or you can also import Bootstrap, and also another test file for unit testing. Then we have angular.json, which is the Angular CLI configuration, which allows to create a lot of things with all the tools inside, everything about the Angular CLI. We also find the karma.conf.js file for the unit test, the necessary packages, so to install the libraries, which will be integrated in this file with the dependencies. We also find the file config, which allows to have the information concerning the TypeScript. So we have seen the necessary functionalities according to the files. Now we will see the directives that we will need. Now that we have seen in detail the functionalities of our files, we will see together some Angular commands that we will need for our project. So we'll have the command ngf, the ngFor, the ngModel, and the click. So all these are called directives. So we're going to see first the ngf. You can see the little star in front of it because it's an arbitrary syntax, so that Angular knows that is a structure. So if you forget it, it won't work. This directive comes from the command module that you find with all its modules that you create via this command module. We'll see how to use it. Here is our example case. Here we have a component with two properties, a boolean of value true, which is stored in is user logged in, and we have a character set, a string which has the value John Doe, for example, which is stored in user full name, and which indicates that the user is connected. We will display the name of the user if it's connected. If the condition is user login is true, the name of the user will be displayed, otherwise nothing. What I advise you to do is to create your properties first, which contains the condition you are going to test. Why? Because your code is very often evaluated by Angular, and for it to be well updated, it will go through your condition and test it, retest it, retest it. So this is an example of how to use this directive. Now we will see ng4. This directive allows to close an array and to inject the elements in the DOM. It's possible to get other information such as the index of the element. So there, for example, we have the ng4. We are going to search for the index. We are also going to search for first or odd. Inside this list, we did ng4 let book of book list. And inside, as I explained to you, we are going to retrieve all the elements. Now let's move on to the ng model. So we have the ng model, which is a built-in directive that creates a form control instance. In other words, from the domain model by binding to a form control element, it binds the value of HTML control to the application data to perform bidirectional binding with input select area via an ng model, which is used to store everything you created in Angular and group them together. So here, for example, in this example case, I'm going to insert an input concerning to the to-do list where it's going to retrieve all the tags that we have entered. With the Angular framework, it's possible to develop a web application or a website entirely without using other tools or languages. The framework applies the MVC model. The controller sends the information to the view that displays it. It's by using this relationship that we can call a function when an element is clicked. However, the notation is different between AngularJS, the very first version of the framework, and the following versions. In your code, you must use the event by indicating between brackets. Click. This is the same type of notation for all events in Angular. The rest of the writing is identical to the classic HTML code for a click on a button. On the other hand, this is all we need for this project. If you need detailed information, I advise you to read the official documentation. Here is the link. Anyway, there is nothing better. I don't advise you to go on forums like Stack Overflow, where you can exchange and ask anyone about your request. But everyone has a typical problem defined that may not correspond to yours. That's the first point, and sometimes the date of the post to which you want answer and dating from a year or more. And it takes little time to have an updated version and therefore different in time. Forums are good, documentation is better, but this is a personal conclusion, so I put the link below. This video is coming to an end. Now we're ready for a project. Let's go! Good morning, everyone. We'll start by making the HTML page. We can see the terminal that built the page instantly concerning the page home.page.html. We will immediately change the title and we will write tags. Between the ion content tags, we will insert an ion list tag. And inside, we will put ion list header. So ion list header to insert my tasks. Underneath, we will insert an ion cart. We will also create a class called tasks to insert underneath an ion checkbox followed by an h4 tag. We will put a task title class. We will also put the name of the task, which will be, for example, do the dishes. And underneath, we will put a button with ion button. We will allow it to be clicked. We will put the fill attribute, which allows us to remove the background with the color danger, and direct style for the positioning with a float right. Finally, a trash icon to have a trash style icon. Below we will introduce a ion footer which will be the bottom of the page, and inside we will put an ion item, which will be the parent tag of ion input, or we will insert the addition of a new task with an insertion button ion input. We will put a placeholder at first. We will tell him add a new task here. And just below we will put the button that will allow us to insert the new task, on which we will put a rounded shape and also a primary color. So color primary. And finally, we will add an add icon, add, to add all the new tasks. So name, add, simply. So ajouter. We already look at our first result, and we can see here all our ionic tag. We can check and uncheck a task. Now we are going to create buttons to add and cancel tags. So with the ion button tags, which will be parent of the two ion button child tags, the first one we're going to customize. So here is the first one with a primary color. We are also going to insert an icon. So for the icons, I invite you to consult the documentation of the official site, ionicframework.com docs v3. So here we are on the official site. In components, you can go to overview, and via overview, you have icons. And here you have the boot code according to what you want. And you have directly the information and the insertions. It's very explicit and very well provided. So we come back to our HTML page with our button concerning the icons. We don't forget to add a slot hand for its position. Here is the icon that I'm going to use. So it's called add circle. So for add, and the second button, we copy and paste. We make the modifications with the color, style, danger, and the name of the icon is backspace for cancel. We modify and we put cancel. And here is the result. We observe well our two buttons on our page. So that's it for our first project video. I will see you in the next video. See you soon! Good morning everyone, and welcome to this video where you will have to answer the quiz that I have prepared for you based on the previous video. For each question you will have 3 possible choices. When there are several answers, it will be indicated. You will have 5 seconds to answer. Are you ready? Let's go! Question number 1. What is Ionic? Answer A, a programming language. Answer B, an open source framework. Or answer C, a software. The correct answer is B, an open source framework. Question 2. What is Ionic used for? Answer A, it allows to build native applications using web technologies. Answer B, it allows to dynamize website. Answer C, it allows to build REST API. The correct answer is A. It allows to build native applications using web technologies. Question 3. In which year was Ionic created? Ever answer A, in 2009, answer B, in 2013, or answer C, in 2017. The correct answer is answer B in 2013. Question 4. Thanks to what do Ionic use native components? Answer A, a server. Answer B, an API. Answer C, plugins. The correct answer is answer C, plugins. Question 5. Which of the following disadvantages do you have? Answer A, compatibility problem. Answer B, less fast than a native application. Answer C, a lot of bugs during deployment. The right answer is B, less fast than a native application. Question 6. Among these tools, which allow to use the plugins, there are several answers. Answer A, Capacitor. Answer B, Adobe Flash Player. And answer C, Apache Cordova. The good answers are answer A and C, Capacitor and Apache Cordova. Question 7. Which tool allows you to create fast and progressive applications on the server side and in the network? Answer A, React.js. Answer B, Angular. Answer C, Node.js. The correct answer is answer C, Node.js. Question 8. Which command allows to know the version of Node.js? There are several answers. Answer A, node-v. Answer B, node2-is version. And answer C, node-installation. The two good answers were answers A and B. Question 9. With which framework is it possible to carry out an Ionic project? There are several answers. Answer A, Spring. Answer B, Angular. And answer C, React. The two correct answers were answer B and C with Angular and React. Question number 10. What is the name of the tool that allows to write and interpret code? Answer A, a text editor. Answer B, a form. Answer C, a writer. The correct answer, A, a text editor. Question 11. What is IonApp? Answer A, an HTML tag. Answer B, a variable. And answer C, an Ionic component. The correct answer, C, is an Ionic component. Question 12. What allows to put style in our Ionic project? Answer A, JS code, JavaScript. Answer B, CSS code. Answer C, HTML code. The correct answer, B, is CSS code. Question 13. What is the component that allows to make buttons? Answer A, button. Answer B, Ionic button. Answer C, Ion button. The correct answer is C, Ion button. Question 14. Which tool allows to get information if needed? Answer A, the documentation. Answer B, the directory. And answer C, the summary. The correct answer is A, the documentation. Question 15. Which CSS attribute allows the spacing between the margins? Answer A, padding. Answer B, display. Answer C, margin. The correct answer is C, margin. Question 16. In a button, what color makes it red? Answer A, red. Answer B, danger. Answer C, alert. The correct answer is B, danger. Question 17. In a button, which attribute allows to change the shape of a button? Answer A, form. Answer B, size. Answer C, shape. The correct answer is C, shape. Question 18. Which JavaScript method allows to dynamize a button during the click? Answer A, click. Answer B, unclick. Answer C, insert in parentheses. The correct answer is A, between parentheses, click. Question 19. Which directive allows you to call the properties of your components? Answer A, ngIf. Answer B, ngFor. Answer C, ngModel. The correct answer is answer A, ngIf. Finally, the last question, 20. What character must be put before the name of the class to assign style in a CSS file? The answer A, the hashtag. Answer B, the arrobas. Or answer C, the dot. The correct answer is C. Congratulations! You have finished the quiz. If you have an average of less than 10, I invite you to review all the videos and the project. If you have an average between 10 and 13, you have the knowledge to continue with these videos while reviewing the previous video. If you have an average between 13 and more, you can continue without worries. In the next videos, we will see in more detail the realization of our project point by point. Good morning everyone. In this video, we will see together how we will associate our project Ionic to Firebase. So Firebase, what is Firebase? It's a set of hosting services created in 2011 for any type of application. It offers to host in OSQL and in real-time databases, content, social authentication, notification, or services such as a real-time communication server. Here is how it looks like. You have the possibility to log in to create your account with Google. If you need to create your account, I will let you do that. You can pause and create your account on the site. I'm going to log in during this time. I'm going to log in as well. And here you are in this home page. We will go to get started. We have two possibilities, either to create a project or to consult the documentation. We're going to look at it. We can click on Learn the Fundamentals of Firebase here, and we have the different modules right here. For example, so we first step with Firebase, depending on your functionality, so an application, a game, a server, a framework, even set up projects by programming. You have the possibility to manage your projects with the frame platforms and frameworks. You also have to protect the project resources with AppCheck or even prototype and test with Emulator Suite. So we are going to look at first steps with Firebase. Adding Firebase to an application. So we're going to take a web type application. And we have several steps in this project. we have step number 1, which is to create a Firebase project and register your applications. To do this, you need to create your project by adding an object. So you have all the necessary protocol, it's very well detailed. Then you will have to install the CDK and initialize Firebase. So to do this, you will have a command to enter in the console. Simply also import this code in the right file. It will be a TypeScript file that I will explain in parallel. Also, step number 3. So Firebase access in your application to be able to actually read and interpret all that we have done. So through variable that we will put in our page.typescript. And the last step is the use of packaging for the reduction of the size. So it will be for well paginated your app. We are going to directly access the console. We are going to create project. You're going to have to enter the name of your project. I'm going to put, for example, Ionic Firebase. As you notice it, the name is already taken. This is why it proposed me another name associated with my project. I'm going to add quite simply FR. I can continue. Thereafter, we continue, we select an account by default, and we can create other projects. Here, our creation of project is in progress. We find ourselves in a few moments. Our project is ready, so we can continue. And now, there are 3 possibilities available to us. We have the possibility of launching our project either iOS or Android or web application. We will choose web applications. For the name and nickname of the application, you do as you see fit. I will put Firebase. We record the application. After that, we propose you to install Firebase, so you have the possibility to do it either via a command or via a script. So I can do it directly via the command. We go on your folder, for example, it's a folder that I call Firebase that I create. We go on our corresponding folder of our project, we enter the command, and here it's installing. We find ourselves in a few moments. After downloading, once the installation is done, we can create an Ionic project. To do this, we will enter the command Ionic start. So you enter the project you want. I will call it Firebase, Angular, always blank, right away. Once it's installed, we can enter the folder, and now we will enter the command Ionic gpage modal that will automatically generate us the model page in our project that we will need to link with Firebase. Once it's done, we will also take the service folder with the command Ionic G service space service / data. And at this point, we can do ng add @ angular / file, which allows us to add a new project Angular. You select the authentication in order to authenticate directly on your Google account, so it's my account. For example, we see that I have created this project, so it's Firebase Ionic FR. Now we can launch an Ionic serve to get our page. So here is our basic page that we have the template of departure. Now we will be able to modify it. So here is after our commands made. Our folder model with all our files and also our folder services that we have downloaded via our command line. Now, we will find our service on our project folder. Here we are going to directly launch a web application. To do this, we must name it. I'm going to name it Firebase. We are going to record the application. We have installed Firebase and there is no problem. We are going to recover the API, and we are going to put in our folder environment, more precisely in the file environment.ts, and we insert just below by putting Firebase double dot So here is the API. The little problem is that I can't read the double quotes, so I will put simple. Here I was able to replace them. We will move on to the next part. Now we need to go to the app module.ts file and we need to add imports. We have imported the environment, so we have also put the path and the free structure accompanying, so in the environment file to find the file indicated, but also the file store space that we will create via the database. Also in the MG module, we will add provide Firebase app precisely to prepare our file to be able to recover the elements in our database. Concerning the database, we will be able to create it. To do this, we will click on Firestore database and we will go to create a database. So we will start in test mode because if you do in production mode, you will have problems concerning the security. So start in test mode. By default, the security rules in test mode allow all users with the reference of your database to display. We click on next. I will take a server at the level of Europe. Activate. Here is our database has been created and now we'll try to associate it with our project. To do this, we will need to go into the services folder. We have a file called data.service.ts. We will make the following modification. Here are the modifications. So I brought imports at the level of Firestore, collection data. So all this via the folder Angular Firestore, so that it can retrieve our database and also all the methods that we will need for our project that I'm going to present. So if you need to write, I will let you pause in this file. We are going to move on. We are going to go to home.page.ts. Here is what all of its functionality looks like that will be formed on our HTML page when clicked. So the next feature in the fact of adding a note, you will have the possibility of inserting a text note. So here is the code. I leave you the possibility of putting on pause if need be. Now we are going to pass to the HTML page. So in our HTML page, we're going to replace this code. So here is the entirety of our code, so it's not very long. The longest thing is to create the functionalities. So it's simply the same as the to-do list. That is to say that we're going to have a form where inside we will have a field on which we will be able to write dynamically a set of characters that will be retained by our console, and the aim of the game is that our database will retain the characters that we have entered, so recorded. So no surprises. As we have done on the to-do list, we are going to apply the click method, which will take up the add node function that we have put on our page.home.ts, which is found here, and which will allow us to take back all the fields that we have filled in. Now we can test our page. So here is our page with our title. Simply we will inspect the element in the console. We will add a note, so the notes, for example, sport, make Abdu, and we will add it. The element is selected, so we'll look more in details in our data page. We can see that this one has been taken into account in our database with our text, Abdu, and our title sport. Here we have been able to associate our Ionic project with our Firebase database. So that's it for the videos, and I will see you soon for the next video. Good morning and welcome to this video. Now that we have had an overview of how our project works, we will see together how to create a component. So we are going to add a new file in the application folder. And inside, we are going to create a subfolder. So I'm going to go directly to the source folder, to the app subfolder, and I'm going to create the folder and name it user. But you can choose something else, of course. Same thing for the file. I'm going to call it user. However, it has to contain the same convention, user.component.ts. And we export a class. Export class, in which you generally name the component user. Here I put in Pascal case. Now we add a decorator. We will put a space and arrobas component to tell Angular that this class should be treated as a component. And here my IDE added the import automatically, but you have to make sure that it's filled in every time you create this type of file. Each file works independently and depends on each dependency of that file. So every object or class which you use from another file must be imported into this file. Now we definitely need a selector here, so we have our own tag to use it. Now you are relatively free as far as naming, but that name will have to have a dash in it so that you don't conflict with the default name is, like H1. I'm going to name it app user to follow the convention with app has a prefix and then the component name. Now I'm also going to add a URL template to link the corresponding HTML file, but this file doesn't exist yet. We are going to create it. Make sure you give the right path so that the IDE finds our HTML file in our tree. So we have created the file. I'm going to name it user.component.html. Here is the file. Inside, we are going to put a p tag to add a paragraph. And I'm just going to put some users and we save. Now, in the app module.ts file, here it is, and we're going to add an import where we are going to import the user component just below it. So I'm going to copy and paste. And I'm going to put user component like this, and you have to make sure that the name that you use here matches your class name that you have created here in this file, and it has to be a relative path that is the user subfolder and in the user component without the TS extension. And then it interacts well on both files. We now added to the declarations that we have to declare in all the components that we use in this module. The question is, where will Angular then look for the selector in this component? And the answer is basically in all the other components in this declaration. But first, I have to modify my file. I replace the parentheses to user components with brackets, and also replace the double quotes with singles to read the import properly. And I delete the one that is of no use to us, so we can go to the application. Now we will test our component that we have created in our file app.component.html in searching app user. You will see that if you go back to your browser, you can see on our page the content of our page about our component that we created. That's it for our video. See you. Good morning everyone, and welcome to this video where I will explain the basic elements of a typical Ionic application that can work both on the web and on a native device integrated with a native mobile application distributed via the stores. And again, these UI components, these Ionic components, are one of the most important, if not the most important, building blocks you need in any Ionic application. Later in this course, we will also learn about topics like theme and style, which is basically adjusting the look of these components. In your specific application, you will have your own style, your own corporate identity that you want to show and that you want to use. And Ionic doesn't stop you from doing that. Just because these components looks pretty or nice out of the box doesn't mean you can name them, and we're going to discuss this later in the course in a separate theme and style module because it's so important. Now, when we will build something with the Ionic app, we also need to dive into navigation, which basically means that we want to switch between different pages in our app. Now, a page here doesn't technically mean a new document retrieved from a server, but you are generally building a so-called single-page application where frameworks like Angular or Vue have libraries like React or React Router that drive the switching of pages and the rendering of different parts of your application on the screen and in mobile applications. We also know the concept of touching something, seeing a new page, and then clicking the back button to go back. So this process of navigation, both on the web and in a native application, that is also something that we're going to go into in this course. Now, when we build a larger application, there will also be a point of time where we have to worry about state management. Actually, state management plays an important role even in small applications. Even then, it's very simple, but more complex because state management becomes difficult. State management really refers to the management of data and information in your own application. Something like if the user is actually sending a request and if it would be a state or something like a list of loaded products, that would be another form of state. And that's something that's not directly related to Ionic but rather to frameworks like Angular, and that's why we use it. Now, when we leave the web application world and we plan to publish our Ionic application as a true native application via the application stores, it will then be integrated with that web view, with that true native application shell, and give way to leverage the functionality of the native machine, such as a camera, which is another element of Ionic's applications. Certainly, this is not really the case with web applications, although you can access some of the functionality of the native machine and what you will also learn in this course, but especially in native application where you can access all the bandwidth of the native machine, for example, the content ID and so on. All this is possible, is not made possible by the Ionic component suite, but by a capacitor that is also developed by the Ionic team or by Cordova, which is not developed by them, but it's supported by Ionic. Finally, the CLI contains a portal you will also get for the production flow and the publishing flow of your application. This is also part of Ionic. All this we will see point by point. In this module, we are going to dive into these UI components because, as I mentioned, no matter what application you are developing, no matter what the design or complexity or whether it's a web application or a mobile application or even both, you're going to be using these components, and that's what we are going to see in the next course. We will be using this module as the basis for our next video. See you soon! Good morning everyone and welcome to this video. In the last video we saw the basic application building block. Now we can ask the question, how can we use these components? In a project where we have imported this Ionic's component library, there are different ways of importing, as you will also discover in this course. So in a project where we import this library, we have access to this Ionic core. We use them as normal HTML elements. Now it's very important to understand that if you have never worked with web components before, the term could be or will be very new to you and you may not know how to use them. In fact, you just need to add them with their tags in your HTML code, in the places where you want to use them, just like for the classic HTML elements. Here is an example. That would be the Ion button, essentially a button provided by Ionic that wraps a normal native HTML button and then adds some additional style onto it, which is also important. These web components are not only about pre-style elements, they also add JavaScript logic to them, or at least they often can. And then this button can be configured here. it can be given attributes, just like you can set attributes on normal HTML elements. But of course, the attributes that you can set here, the property that you can set on this bottom, also depend on the web component that you are using. Because everything you can set here, like fill, which defines the bottom style. These are settings that you can configure, and the official documents are the perfect place to find out what attributes and properties you can set on these web components. So we use it as a normal HTML element. It supports attributes and properties, and these elements can also emit events. It's also very interesting. In fact, you also emit client events that you can listen to, for example, a special ion change event for some drop-down menus, and we will see some of these events throughout the course. Now, a bottom that I mentioned is ultimately a combination of three main engines of the web development front end. It contains HTML code, and here we have the normal HTML elements supported. And in the end, all web components are made up of these HTML elements. It's basically a pre-structured piece of HTML code. However, we don't just have HTML code. We also have CSS styling, and here you see something special for the value, for the color, for what is different. This is a CSS variable that facilitates the styling of this web component from the outside and the application of a general theme. We will dive into that more closely in the style and theme of the course. But as I mentioned, a web component is not just a combination of HTML and CSS. We also have a JavaScript port that adds some functionality to that component, that exposes properties that can be set, that controls the element of that type that we can set, the color or the fill mode of this bottom. So all of that is controlled by JavaScript, and all of that is wrapped together and encapsulated in a JavaScript object that you can add, and we can add to the DOM HTML code with this Ionix bottom selector. Now in our process, this also uses a technique called shadow, DOM, and CSS variables, which helps encapsulate the styles of this component so that the style applied to the elements of this component doesn't spill over to your application or indeed to others. In addition, Ionic web components automatically load all the necessary polyfill to make them work on all the browser by automatically filling in all the required information. This video is coming to an end. Good morning and welcome to this video. Today we are going to do a little bit of practice following the theory. We are going to try to configure an Ionic project without Angular. To do this, we recreate an Ionic project via Angular, and what we are going to do now is delete all the content. So I delete, and I'm just going to add a file that will be called index.html. And in this file, I'm going to enter the HTML skeleton by typing index ! This will take me out of the talk type, and I'm going to change the language. And entity, I'm going to write budget plan. Now, as a first simple fake application, I want to build a budget plan, a list that allows us to add expenses and calculate our total expenses. Now, why I'm using this without Angular? Because although we are using Angular for the rest of the course, one of the great things about this Ionic web component is that it also works without any framework. I want you to understand, and I want to focus only on Ionic. You don't even have a slight idea that Angular could be the purpose, or that Angular could do anything here, because we won't be using in this simple application, but we will be using without worry in the rest of this course. So here I just want to use Ionic, and we can do that. To do this, you will need to go to ionicframework.com. In the Docs tab, via the installation, you will go to Package and CDN. Now here you have learned how to add Ionic to an Angular application, but you will also find this CDN link that you can add to any HTML file to include the Ionic package and the embedded Ionic web component. You should add it here at the end of your main section, so I copy and paste it. However, you don't just need the JavaScript package, you will also want some default style, which is why you have a link attaching the CSS. Now that we have the style and the JavaScript code, we are ready to use the Ionic components. This video is coming to an end. See you in the next video for the rest. Good morning everyone! Now that we have seen how to configure our project in non-Angular, we can ask ourselves what Ionic components we can add. There are more than 100 predefined Ionic components, and you can find them all in the official Ionic documentation. Now feel free to go through the official documentation and use them because it's impossible to learn them all by heart. You will learn them automatically by using them, but use these docs when you create an application. Do it! It's your reference. It's always up to date and it's generated directly from the source code and therefore it's the ideal place. So I will remind you here of the official site https://ionicframework.com. So we are in the doc part with the components and we go to the category bottoms. For example, you have some examples on the right on this Morphon success warning, danger, so in relation to the colors. You have bottoms of type large with light, medium and dark, etc. And you have expand, which allows you to fill in the description of the component, whether it is for this one or for the others. So you can learn its role, its use, its general configuration methods, like the configuration of the file mode to erase the outline or to define the outline of the bottom. You have some usage examples with different configuration code examples. Note that you have the JavaScript and Angular versions, which for this code, of course, don't differ, and then you have a list of all the properties, which is also generated from the source code, and you can see what properties you can set as attributes on the element and on the values that you can pass for each attribute. We also have access to the default events such as click or whatever, and this is the case for all the components and this will become important later on. When we get to the styling, you can see what CSS properties you can execute to control the appearance of your component. So there is a lot in this document, now we can use it and start creating our little widget plane. To do that, I invite you to follow the next video. Good morning everyone! Now to find the solution to the problem of our components, sometimes not having the right width for different screen size, it's important to understand that Ionic contains 3 different types of components. This is an official term, but I think it will help you if you think of these components in these terms in an explanatory way. First of all, we have components that help us with the output of the data. We have components that help us with the layout, the organization and classification of the components, the input. And we have components that help us with the user input. The output components are elements such as Ion image, Ion badge, Ion label, Ion title. Components that mainly display elements. Obviously in this list there are things like Ion alert, where the user can also press a button and interact with it. Of course, this component does both, but in general these components are mainly intended to display something on the screen that we want the user to see. The layout components are not themselves directly visible, but their effect is visible because they basically allow us to structure the content. For example, Ion grid, which we haven't used yet, but we will use, for example, Ion list, Ion tabs. So basically, those components that sometimes also have their visible parts like Ion card, but that they are also important for grouping elements, ordering the elements in a certain way. And finally, the input components like Ion bottom, Ion input, Ion text area, so that the user can interact with all these components, type something, click something, press a button. So those are 3 important categories that we looked at among the components in each of those categories. Now, since we have a component that is too large, we want to reduce the size and we will surely need Ion grid. I will see you in the next Good morning everyone. In this video we are going to focus on the components ion grid that we can find on our official documentation by finding a complete article on its presentation. Then it's a component that, has its name suggests, will allow you to make grids, as you see here on this smartphone. It can be complex or not difficult but rich in functionality. It's a component that can be very useful when you consider creating an app. It should work on mobile devices as well as on desktop computers. We can use this grid here to reduce the size of our ion card. Remember, on larger screens, we go back to our source code at the level of our ion content around the content, where I want to control the size. We can add the ion grid component. However, you don't just paste your content that should be resized, because as Ionic it will know how to resize it automatically. The solution is to create a grid with rows, called row, so ion row. And each row will contain an ionic column. Thus, the rows and columns constitute the grid, and we will even go further because for a column you can even define its size and the size of its content, because it's ion code which contains the content to be entered, so the ion card. I'm going to move it into this column. So I grab the ion card and cut it and put it into the ion code like this. We can use the default properties and attributes that we can set on this element that you can find in the official documentation. For example, we can define a size attribute with size that we're going to set to a value of 6. So by default, a column can have a size between 1 and 12. That's why I set it to 6 and I entered the average between the two. But if you want more details, it means that I will take a 12th of the total width, so 6 will take off, and if I save the changes made and we return to our browser, we can see that our ion card has been reduced. It's now smaller and twice as large as the screen, but of course on a smaller device we get not a very nice rendering. So how can we get the best distribution? Have the full width on a smaller device and take off the width on a larger screen. Well, for that we can use specialized forms of its attributes. Instead of defining a size equal to 6, we can define a size MD equal to 6. What does that mean? Simply, MD is the diminutive of medium. You also have XS, so extra small, and also S for small, and also LG for large. So we take the medium as for closing size, for example. This is what allows you to define the size of different screen sizes. You can find breakpoints for the size in the official documentation. Now, if we save this now and I search on the mobile app, you see that we have the full width design, but on larger screens. The iPad Pro, for example, it gives a not very well symmetrical result. What would suffice to do is to center our content, and it returns out we can do that as easily. You can add this property which is called offset and assign it the value of 3 because we have 12 columns. They are 6 wide, so we want to have 3 columns on the left and 3 columns on the right, which is it 3 columns to the left. Obviously, I don't want you offsetting on all screen size, but only on medium and larger screen sizes, which is important when you add a medium size, so MD. Now with this configuration, size MD equals 6 and offset MD equals 3, if we save and reload our browser, we can see that the result is well centered both on the highest ranking screen and on the smallest ones. We still have all the width available, and this is exactly the look what we want here. Ionic Grid has a lot of configuration possibilities, and therefore I just want you to understand that we have different categories of components, and you will have different tools to be able to change the size depending on the user's device. This video is coming to an end, and I will see you in the next one. Good morning everyone, our application is starting to take shape and look quite nice without even having writing a single line of CSS thanks to these nice styles brought by Ionic. This gives us ideas like composing a rich user interface with an attractive appearance and, as you will see, quite powerful and feature-rich components with little effort. It's true that I explain a lot, but in terms of code, we didn't write that much code and we only worked in HTML. So we have our card with the two separate ion card elements header and content. Now I also want to have a button to submit my interest here. So underneath Ion item, I'm going to insert our Ion button. I'm going to add some text to it saying add expenses, and I'm going to duplicate it to get to the delete button, which will be in the first position. So if we reload our application, we can see our two buttons. In fact, they are very visual, but we can give a different look. For example, I want my delete button to have a red color and an underline look, where there is no background color but only a border and a text color. And I also want to have an icon that signals that it cancels the entry and clears the fields. And on the expense button, I also want an icon with a plus symbol, leaving a style as is. So in the first step, we will take care of the delete button. We can define the file mode with the file attribute. Of course, you can find other more customizable alternatives according to your tastes in the documentation. In this example, I demonstrate a fairly standard style. So I'm going to have file equal outline, and as far as the color is concerned, we're going to put danger, which will be red. And so if we save and reload our application, we get this result. Alright, now we can move on to the icons. So we go back to our documentation, and we can navigate directly to our Ion icon component, and that will take you to a new page because you couldn't add it to any application. Has a separate package, but the Ionic package that we're importing from the CDN already has it included, so there is no need to do any additional import. So we will insert our Ion icon at our Ion button in front of the word delete. Now such an icon takes a name attribute, which we will find in our documentation page. So I enter a keyword, I will put delete. Perfect. If I click on this trash box, I will have the code just below that I can copy by clicking on it. So we go back to our code and we paste it in. And now if we take a look at our app, we can see this rendering, which can be further improved a little bit by clearly indicating to the icon where it should be thanks to the slots. So quite simply in our icon, we can design it a start location indicating slot start. And if we go back to our app, we can see that we have more slots between the icons and the text. It looks like a little cleaner. Now we still need to insert an icon for adding expenses. This is the perfect time for you to try for yourself to insert an icon like our previous button. So I will let you pause the video and practice. Are you successful? First, let's find an icon that matches or add expenses. So I'm going to put add as a keyword, and I'm going to get the code from this one that looks appropriate. So we copy the code next to our text, and we don't forget to insert the slot start. We reload our application, and here is the result. So these are standard buttons. Now what about spacing around the buttons and alignment? How can this be done? That's what we'll see in the next video.